You have 91 Desert Storm. It lasts whatever it was, like 72 hours or 96 hours. It was quick. They get in, they take control of what they need to, they get out. They don't continue this whole war. Mm-hmm. And then there's this narrative that, you know, probably has some truth to it, that like it was unfinished business and W wanted to finish what his father started. But you have, between March 1st, 2003 and 91, you have effectively an 11, 12-year gap where Saddam Hussein's in charge.
And so this is why
who he hated,
who he absolutely hated and feared, and would have had nothing to do with. Yeah. And I believe that they let Bin Laden go, and I make the case in both books.
You believe the U.S. let Bin Laden out of Tora Bora,
and I'll make that case in a moment. But I think the motive for them doing so was so that they could tell you that Saddam could give these weapons to Osama. If Osama bin Laden was already dead, and your dad and your next door neighbor already had said, well, that's what you get for messing with us. We kick your ass by Christmas time. Well, then it's hard to get the war started again. You got to keep the thing going. And this is what Donald Rumsfeld said, and it's in the National Security Council notes, that maybe we should start bombing Iraq right now, even as we're bombing Afghanistan right away, because we want the American people to understand this war is going to take place over a large geographical area and over an extended period of time. He says, if we get Osama bin Laden, that's not victory. And if we fail to get him, that is not failure, because he ain't got nothing to do with this now. We're going to Baghdad, baby. We're doing all of this.
I don't want to get you off track.
That was their motive.
I don't want to get you off track here, Scott, but I do have one question on this financially. Mm-hmm. How much of the motive do you think was also some underhanded, like, well, there's a lot of oil there and this could be in the U.S. interest that we maybe control some of this land in the future and, you know, colonize the oil, if you will? Do you think that was a piece of it?
No. I think the oil aspect was Chalabi promised he'd build a pipeline to Haifa and it'd be good for Israel. And they bought it. Pearl and Wormser and Netanyahu himself even made reference to these promises. And Douglas Feist's law partner, Mark Zell, complained, Chalabi promised us an oil pipeline to Haifa. He's a treacherous, spineless turncoat. He promised us one thing, and now he's palling around with a whole new group of friends and not doing anything he said. So he really used them and essentially tricked them into doing this war. Now, everything I understand about it was that Exxon and all of them said, we can do business with Saddam Hussein. They had no interest in that was not their project to overthrow Baghdad. And when we were doing the war anyway, they got James Baker, who was the lawyer for Baker Botts, the lawyer for Exxon, to come in and insist. See, the neoconservatives, led by a guy named Elliot Cohen, who I believe also was on the Defense Policy Board from the Heritage Foundation, he had a plan to rapidly privatize Iraqi oil in order to break OPEC's control. And James Baker came to town and said, no, we're not doing that. There's going to be a national oil company and our guys are going to run it and they're going to set their quota the way that the Saudis want it to be and quash that. I don't believe that the motive was taking control of those fields for American companies. Now, did Houston try to stop them or something like that? No. Although, I don't know, James Baker did try to stop W. Bush. I don't know how hard he tried to stop him. But if Houston is James Baker, then yeah, they did try to stop him. But it is true that Exxon got away with murder anyway. I mean, they have huge interests in northern Iraqi Kurdistan now.
Yeah.
They're doing what they can. But do I think that they were driving this car? No. And that's the most powerful corporation in the world, but it wasn't their war, dude. They were, a lot of times, even all the pipeline politics and stuff like that is not about corporations demanding pipelines to satisfy their profits. It's about the national government saying, our military strategy says, if we build a pipeline here, we'll really screw those guys there. Do you guys want to do this pipeline with us? And then the corporations go, yeah, sure. But you got to help build the pipeline. Hell, especially if you want it to go west instead of south, you better subsidize it because it's going to cost twice as much. And so we see that a lot where it's really the Pentagon overall is driving the strategy and the oil companies are, of course, riding along, but are not driving.
kind of mentioned directly and indirectly throughout the day in different contexts, referring to like the power structure during the W. Bush years between, you know, him on one end and then call it like Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, and the people behind them on another end. And I just kind of want to get it straight on officially what you think. But do you think it was more Dick Cheney in charge of that White House? I mean, you had said something like nothing happens without W, and I guess constitutionally that is what it's supposed to be. But it always felt like, you know, this was a guy who had significant power long before W was around. He was placed in there by W's father, who was the previous president, you know, and he had all these ideas, including the backing of a company called Halliburton, that he was in fucking charge of, that then seemed to kind of come to fruition while everything crashed and burned.
Yeah.
You know, that was supposed to be the outcome. What do you think the dynamic was there?
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty much on the record, pretty well confirmed, as Dick Cheney would say, that they had an agreement that Bush would delegate foreign policy to him in large part. The idea was, you know, W. Bush is the president. He gets to decide on all the biggest stuff. But after all, Vice, you're the smart guy who knows all the foreign policy stuff. My dad says you're great, whatever. So there was kind of a contest at first. There's a contest between him and Powell for who was going to have the most influence. And I think Powell lost out pretty quickly there.
Yes, he did.
And then, yeah, Cheney was driving. And like I say, he had this alliance with these neoconservatives, this network, and they knew what to do. It by no means did they make W. Bush do it. What they did really, in terms of their relationship with him, because they did a hell of a lot in terms of the lies and in the media and everything else. But in terms of dealing with him, their responsibility was telling him, yes, sir, you're smart. This is going to work. This is going to be great. We know we game this out and we got our guys. He knows what to do and the thing. And so, and then it was like, well, geez, everybody says Paul Wolfowitz is the smartest guy in the Defense Department, you know? So that was, I think, the role that they played as far as their influence on him. And I think it was crucial. Yeah. But the responsibility absolutely was his, you know? I mean, even when the planes are flying, even weeks or months into it, he could call the whole thing off the whole damn time and never did. He launched it and he owned it every moment of that war, you know, through the end of his presidency.
What's really bizarre to me, to take a step back for a second, is that you have 91 Desert Storm. It lasts whatever it was, like 72 hours or 96 hours. It was quick. They get in, they take control of what they need to, they get out. They don't continue this whole war. And then there's this narrative that, you know, probably has some truth to it, that like it was unfinished business and W wanted to finish what his father started. But you have, between March 1st, 2003 and 91, you have effectively an 11, 12-year gap where Saddam Hussein's in charge. And like he still has a seat at the table in the world. It's like we went in, we said this guy's a maniacal dictator who shouldn't have charge of anything, you know. We handled some of the oil field business in 91 and then we left. And it's not like, you know, he was completely separated from the world. He still ruled the whole country and everything. And then suddenly they start drumming up the war bells again, the war drums again in 01, 02 and saying, no, like he's killing everyone. And you said it earlier, so I want to dig into this, that they lied all about Saddam Hussein. Now, to be clear, you are 1,000% right when you talk about they lied about nuclear bombs and they lied about his relationship with Osama bin Laden as if he had one. He didn't like him. Like Trump, actually, I'll give him credit for this. He had a good line back in 2015. He's like, you know, Saddam Hussein, bad guy, killed terrorists, right? Like, you know, it wasn't our job to go in there and overthrow another leader and start a whole war. And I will agree with Donald Trump on that. But some of the other things, like, you wouldn't say that they were lying that like he was a bad guy and that he was a dictator and that he ruled with an iron fist and killed a lot of people and, you know, was a threat on some level to some stability in the Middle East. Would you be able to say that that part is true?
Well, not exactly the way that you put it. Like he absolutely was a ruthless dictator, but the way they make that is that directly translates into an aggressive threat against neighboring states. You know how those dictators are. That's not true.
Yeah,
there are
no,
all
he
kinds of
wasn't.
dictators that don't invade people all the time, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
even just in that sense, I mean, what he really was Tony Soprano trying to hold everything together. You know what I mean? Not like, oh, his will is like like this magic spell that controls these people's every behavior. It's a rowdy land, over
I'm
there.
going to use that. I like that.
He was and he was ruthless in power. But then what did they say? They said he tortured people by putting them in giant human shredders. They said, that, they made up the most ridiculous tortures that he was involved in. They said that, oh, he gassed his own people, but they neglect to mention that was when he worked for Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush, and they took his side in it, and they had paid for his purchase of those chemical weapons from the Europeans. They helped him target the Iranians with those chemical weapons. Then, he used some on the Kurds, and then what? Ronald Reagan blamed it on Iran when he used chemical weapons on his Kurds. So, and then that was all in the 1980s.
Right.
So what in the hell does that have to do with an excuse to invade Iraq in 2003? Nothing, right? So in other words, like even when, and I know you're being fair, but even the way you phrased the fair question, it's a bunch of loaded crap, right? That was what they were shoveling at the time.
Yeah,
it was like
terrible war.
You could boil your question down to, hey, this guy didn't stand for election, which is like, yes, I agree with you. He clearly took power in a bloody coup, and immediately Jimmy Carter sponsored his invasion of Iran, which Ronald Reagan continued to back for the next 8 years, right? So we used to joke when we were kids, yeah, of course the guy's a ruthless dictator. That's why he got the job working for the United States of America before USA betrayed him in 1990 and 91, is what really happened there. And so, was he dangerous? Yeah, if you live in East Baghdad, he was dangerous. Was he dangerous even to Jordan or Israel? No. Was he a danger to the United States of America? Gotta be kidding. And even Kuwait, he asked permission to invade Kuwait and got it. And then they lied their asses off that he was about to invade Saudi Arabia so that they could launch that war to drive him out of Kuwait when he had no intention of going to Saudi Arabia in the first place. And especially after they told him, don't you go to Saudi Arabia now. And then he was like, yeah, but they gave him a flashing yellow light at least for Kuwait. The ambassador herself told the New York Times, you can pull it up if you want. Well, we didn't think he was going to take the whole country. Her name's April Glaspie.
I've heard this one.
1990. Mm-hmm. So, in other words, they gave him permission to invade part of Kuwait and conquer their northern oil fields. Mm-hmm. They told him to go ahead. And that was at the height of his power, right? So, no. The way that they framed it, that he was a danger, not at all. But you know what? You know who he's a danger to? Israel. Even then, just a nuisance.
I was going to say, was it bluster or was it actual danger?
It was actual danger, but on a minimal level. There you go.
Is that what you were looking for? What Deep pulled up? Confrontation in the Gulf. U.S. gave Iraq little reason not to mount Kuwait assault. This is from September 1990. All right. In the 2 weeks before Iraq's seizure of Kuwait, the Bush administration, on the advice of Arab leaders, gave President Saddam Hussein little reason to fear a forceful American response if his troops invaded the country. The administration's message to Baghdad, articulated in public statements in Washington by senior policymaker and delivered directly to Mr. Hussein by the United States ambassador April Glaspie, was this: the United States was concerned about Iraq's military buildup on the border with Kuwait, but did not intend to take sides in what it perceived as a no-win border dispute between Arab neighbors. In a meeting with Mr. Hussein in Baghdad on July 25th, 8 days before the invasion, Ms. Glaspie urged the Iraqi leader to settle his differences with Kuwait peacefully, but added, "We have no opinion on the Arab conflicts like your border disagreement with Kuwait," according to an Iraqi document described as a transcript.
The American version of that document was released in 2010 by Manning and Assange. So that's true and holds up, by the way. And then the quote is in there somewhere where she says, well, we didn't think he was going to take the whole country. She says that to the Times.
Can we find that? We didn't.
Somewhere. And she does have
to suggest that we're to blame for all this and we lulled them into thinking they could have Kuwait is really terrible. But we should have had a stiffer tone. It is unlikely to have made a difference, but it might have made a difference.
That's not it.
Okay.
It's in there somewhere.
I believe you. It's somewhere in there. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Point being, I got you. So there.
Try whole. Maybe that's the wrong essay. Maybe that's the wrong. I mean, there are a few different news reports about her and her role in this. So that the quote, I'm almost certain, is nobody thought or we didn't think he was going to take the whole country. And I'm sorry because I already had skipped ahead to one more story after this, and then I forgot what it was though. What were we talking about after the border dispute here?
After the border dispute,
yeah, after Iraq,
we were going through Iraq's threat or perceived threat to Israel.
Oh yes, so I was going to say, thank you, dude. Mm-hmm. I was going to not find that one in my head.
Up just a little bit, like on this big one. You're good. I don't want you worried about it. I just want him up a little bit. Or down. I'm sorry. So his head's up.
So in this quote, you'll like to find this too. It's, in fact, I can find it. I have it on my phone because I just sent it to a friend recently.
Other way, Deef. Down, so his head's up higher. Yep. Here we go.
Okay, here we go. I sent this quote to a friend, so I have it right here. Okay, this is Philip Zelikow, famous as the chief author of the 9/11 Commission Report.
Great report. Very accurate.
I never read that, by the way.
You never read it?
No, I didn't want to be, as Ron Paul would say, I don't want to be confused by their propaganda. There's good journalism out there. But so Zelikow, you should understand about him, if you want to, that he is not a neoconservative. Zelikow was more of a Brent Scowcroft, Condoleezza Rice, Council on Foreign Relations type, along with Robert Blackwell and good old, what's his name? There was one other guy that was kind of around Rice at that time, who was a little bit separate from the neocons. Anyway, just so you know, more of a centrist type. But anyway, here's what Zelikow said. In 2002, before the war, he said, why would Iraq attack America or use nuclear weapons against us? I'll tell you what I think the real threat is, and actually has been since 1990. It's the threat against Israel. And this is the threat that dare not speak its name, because the Europeans don't care deeply about that threat, I will tell you frankly. And the American government doesn't want to lean too hard on it rhetorically, because it is not a popular sell. So, yeah, in other words, Iraq's no threat to the United States. Are you kidding me? But these neocons are a bunch of Likudniks. And they think Iraq is a threat to Israel, and they think they can get W. Bush to get rid of Saddam Hussein for them. And so let's do this. That was what it was about. And now, so what was Iraq's threat to Israel? It was not a land invasion. What it was that Saddam Hussein would pay money to the family of anybody who died in conflict with Israel, any Palestinian who died in conflict with Israel. So that meant if some little old lady got bulldozed in her home, he would pay her family a condolence payment type thing, right? But that also meant the family of a suicide bomber who targeted civilians on a city bus, his family would get a stipend too. Mm-hmm. And so that was taken you would too, right? As a bounty essentially for Palestinian terrorists to kill Israeli civilians. So even though you look at this as even a bus full of Israeli civilians at a time, that's a horror show, but that's not a national security threat to the United States of America.
Yeah.
And that's not even Iraq attacking Israel. That is Iraq backing a proxy force doing something horrible. But I'm sorry, you got to send the infantry from Texas and Colorado and Alabama and Indiana to go and fight that war? And you got to threaten to nuke our cities. We can't wait for the proof to be a mushroom cloud. We can't wait for the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud. What if an American city got nuked because you wouldn't let us preempt this threat?
The 1%
We
doctrine.
can't wait.
Yeah. Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.